Welcome students. With enactment of 3 laws replacing the old colonial laws, India has moved into a different phase. But today we are experiencing a lack of governance and lack of jurisprudence in a new horizon. And that is the scenario of digital jurisprudence in India. So without any delay, let's look at the scenario of digital jurisprudence in India, the existing provisions of it, and what improvements could be done. Okay. So, considering the present scenario of digital jurisprudence in India, the way science and technology and the digital space is transforming is at larger pace than the governance scenario or the provisions or laws that are being made in parliament are very slow. So, long story short, digital space is fastly expanding and law and provisions are at lag. So, to understand this scenario, we need to understand what is the existing provisions that we are using to govern. If you understand that existing scenario, so that we could suggest what improvements could be done and what are the best practices around the world and what can make Indian conditions to catch the pace of the development of digital transformation. So, without any delay, let's look at the existing provisions, which we can broadly classify as statutory provisions, and to some extent even judicial pronouncement. So this judicial pronouncement tried to fill the gaps in this statutory provisions. So what all statutory provisions we have? The first one is IT Act. IT Act of 2000 is broadly governing this digital space and some minor guidelines. So other guidelines. So these other guidelines, let's look at those things perfectly. Okay, so one after the other. So the first one that we are looking at is about the guidelines about social media intermediaries. So these guidelines have some implications on IT Act protections. Let's get back to it, but broadly let's understand what all provisions that we have. There are also provisions about account aggregators' responsibility. And this responsibility is actually defined and detailed discussion of it is being in the guidelines of RBI. Because here, not just the digital space governance, but even the data privacy and fiduciary responsibility is involved. So when I say fiduciary, what does fiduciary mean? This fiduciary, the word fiduciary defines as the person who has some data or some information of the third customer, when the third person who is customer has a responsibility to protect them. So this fiduciary has to take permission from the customer before using it for anything else, any analysis or any kind of thing. And the approach which is prescribed by Sri Krishna Committee on data privacy is minimum non-personal approach. So with minimum non-personal approach, if you implement the account aggregators responsibility, which accounts to again fiduciary responsibility, and with social media intermediate guidelines. So the corresponding domains, if they follow these guidelines, IT Act of 2000 is giving one protection, which is safe harbor protection. What does this safe harbor protection mean? And how is this safe harbor protection is helpful for any entrepreneur or any firm who is continuing the digital business? So if you follow these guidelines, you are given a benefit which is safe harbor. So let's understand this with an example. Suppose Flipkart or Amazon is selling a product, or Facebook is allowing you to use a social media platform. If there is a kind of incitement or any kind of communal comment or any criminal expression of thought is being done through those platforms, or sold an illegal product using that e-commerce platform, then the platform is not punished for allowing it. Only the person who is selling or the person who is publishing the kind of information, comment or something else will be punished. So this protection of intermediary or the platform which is being used comes under safe harbor protection. Hope you understood this. So broadly, we understood the statutory provisions and the kind of protection is being given. And one more thing which may come with generative AI. With generative AI expanding its horizons, because it sources information from existing sources and it remodels and gives you in a new form. This generative AI produces new kind of information and art forms. So there may be a chance of copyright infringement or IP right infringement. So this copyright and intellectual property rights. So these two laws also find some overlapping horizon in this generative AI space. So these are the existing provisions which are statutory. Now, if you come to the judicial part, this judicial part, we have very few judgments, but they are significant enough. The first one is about Shreya Singhal versus Union of India. This case, young lawyer Shreya Singhal challenged Union of India about her freedom of expression being infringed by an act. So IT Act's section 67A has been partially struck down. Not completely, but partially struck down. The whole act is still valid, but this section would be scrutinized. What does that say? It was actually stopping them from expressing their opinions in social media. So, fundamental right of Article 19 subclause A superseded this section. So, this is no more used to punish or convict any person who is expressing their Article 19 subclause A, but with reasonable restrictions. However, Article 19 would prescribe. This is one thing. And another case, which broadly is concerned with privacy. So the data privacy would become a subset of that privacy. So the famous case of K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India. So again, the example of Aadhaar data, can government use according to its will about the Aadhaar data? The answer is not an absolute yes or absolute no. There lies a gray area. So there should be a reasonable sourcing and reasonable restrictions on both sides. So data privacy matters. So as we understood the existing provisions. Now, let's understand the best practices in other parts of the world and the kind of laws or the kind of rights we need to bestow on people. If you understand that, then we can conclude. One famous practice about GDPR laws which are prevalent in European Union, if you just look at that, there is a right to forget. They call it a right to erasure. Erasure is nothing but erase the data. If a person who is not convinced or comfortable to have his data in internet, he can claim a right to be forgotten. Suppose there's a person who was accused in a case but was not convicted. Still his name is surfing on internet. Maybe a judicial case law, or it can be even the news articles that surf in internet. He can at least be granted this right to be forgotten, so that he doesn't feel humiliated by the name that is surfing in internet. So such kind of practices are being adopted by European Union using the GDPR laws. So these European Union bestows GDPR laws. So can we do that in India? Can we regulate the IP rights better to suit the generative AI? So these are places where the present parliament need to catch up and accelerate the law, having a data privacy bill to convert into a data privacy law, concrete law, which helps India to govern this transforming digital space better. Hope you had informative video today. Another day with better content and much more informative video. I'll be back before you. Till then, thank you.